Okay, so now I have 1 minute until we start the meeting. This is about why I got this. The medical marijuana license being denied in Augusta. Is that the same party that's trying to put one in here? Hi, that's your mic. I can read that. Are we expecting Marty? Are we expecting Marty tonight?
It's hard to predict.
Okay.
All the time, it's usually late. Except for the time he slept. Remember?
Okay, it's 6:30, so we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to this public budget meeting and hearing. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. If you would please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I'm going to start the meeting with something that I just thought of, and hopefully, Bill, you can hear me because I'm on the microphone. But it's really nice that we have this set up and we have the curtain that comes around. I've been to several other meetings recently where they have none of that. Sorry, Dave, your legs are showing tonight. But Readfield's a pretty classy place, so this is really good. So thank you to Bill for always setting this up for us. Okay, so the agenda tonight is welcome and introductory comments of 10 minutes. It will not take that long. We're going to review the budget and meeting goals for 5 minutes. Then we're going to have a 90-minute or less presentation and discussion of the summary budget information. Other business, 5 minutes, and closing comments of 10 minutes. In talking about this with the vice chair and the town manager, this is basically a repeat of the workshop that we had about 3 weeks ago, where the budget committee and the select board both had a lot of chance for input, as well as the public. So tonight I'd like to focus primarily on the public, because we've already all given our 2 cents on everything. And that will help to keep things focused on the issues that the public have. So with that, we'll do introductions from the select board. We'll start with you, Dave.
Dave Linden.
Carol Dornbos.
Sean Keegan.
And then, does anyone from the select board have any other comments, or are we good? Okay, I'll turn it over to Andy.
Thank you. I'm Andy Tolman. I'm budget committee chair and all this. The budget committee introduced themselves so they get to say something.
Chris Salmons.
Glenn Schneider. Ed Sims.
Thank you. Any comments? Well, we've got the floor for a moment.
So at this time, if there's any comments from the public, just in general, any statement anyone would like to make, the floor is yours. There is nobody in the room who is taking advantage of that. Is there anyone online who is looking at online? Are you doing that, Sean?
I'm looking at a chat, yeah. I don't see anything.
Okay, you will have a chance to ask things during Eric's presentation. Eric, do you want me to continue? Mine are not color coded, so I don't know where.
Yes, so you would be doing the budget process summary.
And
then
the goals.
And then Andy does the meeting goals.
Okay. So to date, we've had 16 public meetings and presentations to develop and discuss the budget since last October. We've had review and comments by member of the public, by boards, committees, the budget committee, and the select board. We've reviewed budget details for all departments and divisions, and we've reviewed and revised the 5-year capital plan and the new revised accounting structure. And just a note to the public and a reminder to the Budget Committee and the Select Board that we're meeting on our June 20th meeting. I think it's the 20th, whatever the third Monday is, for a 1-hour workshop to continue on the revised accounting structure and how that affected the CIP. So we'll be more prepared for next fall.
You said it was a Monday?
Yes, it's our second meeting in June. So we'll have half a business meeting and half a workshop.
The 17th.
17th, okay, great. Andy,
So the goal tonight, from the point of view of the budget, although there are other goals obviously that have brought some of you here, is to do a summary report on the budget and answer questions. Although, as you know, the warrant is printed, you've got copies with you, some of you. So we won't be changing the warrant, but if you want to understand better why things are the way they are, we'd be happy to try to help that. We're also going to talk about the land use ordinance revision on non and Church Road sidewalk and the Fairgrounds Community Park. And so the idea is to have enough information so that people can make an intelligent vote at the public meeting for the vote. So we are, as a group, are trying to be fiscally responsible and spend conservatively. We want to fund all the necessary expenses to keep the town and our programs going. At the same time, we want to minimize that impact on the taxpayers, have a sustainable and stable level of debt, use our fund balances responsibly towards that end, have a long-range capital planning process, and consider the town budget, which we have some control over, separate from the school and county budgets, which we have much less control over. And we also hope to work together towards the public good.
Back to you, Kathy.
aha,
Yeah, it's not pale blue, so
It's-
it's yours.
it's not bright green, so, all right. So this year, the Select Board in our annual retreat, which we had at the end of September, decided that we would like to finish projects that we've been working on this year and not create new ones unless they were absolutely critical. And to finalize some projects that were ongoing. So the big goal is to prioritize investment in recreational assets and public facilities, being a community programming coordinator, the Readfield Fairgrounds Community Park, and the Church Road sidewalk. We've been trying to pursue creative financing grants and community donations for projects. One of the projects is only going to be funded through those types of things, not through local tax dollars. That's the fairgrounds. We want to continue to improve in communication and collaboration in the budget process. That was a really big goal, and I think that's gone much better this year. Maybe not much better. It's gone well this year. I think it was good last year. And to better define our capital projects and further develop the capital investment plan. That's really the core for everything that the Budget Committee is doing in terms of trying to figure out what we should purchase when, based on the requests that come in from the various departments, and then what makes the most fiscal sense in terms of borrowing now, borrowing later, increase costs, decrease costs, et cetera. And to complete the transition in accounting. So we've changed the way the accounting structure is set up. So if you're looking at the budget detail that comes through the TRIO reports, you'll see that some categories have zero that used to have lots of money. And then we have new categories that never had any money that now has that money that was shifted. And this was all in an effort to make things more transparent and to be in real time. So Teresa, the finance officer, will be able to tell us, starting in the next fiscal year, pretty much at any point in time, how much is in any expense account, how much is in any capital reserve account. And those were things we couldn't do previously because of the way the accounts were set up. This was all done at the suggestion and with the cooperation of our auditors. So I think it's worked really well, and it's taken a lot of time for Eric and Teresa, and hopefully it will benefit them in the long run, saving time later.
Okay, thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
So I'm Eric Dyer, I'm the town manager. I'm here with Teresa Shaw, our finance officer, and Angelica Pittman, who is our collections clerk and various board secretaries. So she does a little bit of everything. We appreciate both of them being here. I appreciate both of them being here, and also the work they put in, along with the work of these boards, the select board and budget committee, to get this budget to where it is today. Of course, also the public input and the significant work from the many boards and committees that contributed to the budgets that we're going to be looking at talking about tonight. Two things before I get started. I did hear from Marty. He is watching online and participating online, so he's on Zoom tonight. And Steve DeAngelis is a new grandfather, I think again, but he's got a new one, so he's excused. So I'll get started and just talk about some big picture items before we move into more specifics about revenue and expenditures. We are dealing with some pretty big forces outside of the town of Readfield. One being the global economy and the impacts that we're still feeling from the COVID pandemic. The other being property values, which I guess is also a COVID impact. Real estate values in the town of Readfield have increased dramatically over the past several years, and statewide. And the state of Maine is really the driving force behind the need for us to continue to increase our valuation. If we just had a static valuation, we wouldn't have to worry about the state. We could just say, well, these houses are similar to these houses, and we're going to build them accordingly. But the state of Maine dictates what we have for value. They tell us what our value is. And if we don't in some way try to match that in our own internal accounting, there are consequences such as lost revenue sharing, things like that. So we are on the fourth year of our adjustments to the property values in Readfield. We had 10%, 10%, 15%, and now this year our assessor is recommending a 20% increase in the assessed value. And that still puts us only at about 90 to 95% of what the state says our property should be valued at. So we are scrambling to keep pace, and that has an effect on the mill rate. The mill rate drops proportionately to the increase or vice versa, in valuation. So when the valuation goes up, the mill rate goes down, assuming all expenses and revenues are equal. But we have, as you know, some increases coming our way from the municipal, county, and school budget. And so what we're seeing this year is a municipal mill rate of about 2.27. And a total mill rate of about 13.45. And that includes the RSU and county taxes. So as you can see, it's about 20-25% of that mill rate is the town. Last year, the mill rate was 14.16. So you're seeing a slight decrease in the mill rate, but certainly not commensurate with the 20% increase in valuation that we saw. So just some things to keep in mind there. And I'll start moving more quickly through this. The budget highlights. Labor and materials are a big driver, as they are with all of the other budgets that we're seeing. 5% negotiated wage increases, and also we are adding a part-time community programming coordinator. We lost $60,000 in state revenue sharing. That's very impactful for us when you consider that we're looking at a roughly, excuse me, I got it sort of popped up here on my screen, a roughly $73,000 net cost increase for the town. So if we hadn't lost that revenue, we would be seeing just a $13,000 increase. So we have tried very, very hard and been very successful at keeping these costs as low as possible in an inflationary environment. So we're budgeting for a 7.1% municipal tax increase for fiscal year 2025 relative to last year. That seems like a lot, but when you look at the big picture, we're actually just coming out of our COVID dip. Back in 2019, we had a mill rate or not a mill rate, we had a valuation and a tax impact out of pocket for residents that's almost identical to what it is now. So we started off in 2019, that tax impact dropped for about 3 years, and then it's come back up for the last 3 years. So you'll see that in the graph I'm going to show next, but I just wanted to make that point and make it clearly that we're, as residents, paying the same amount that we were in 2019. So for the municipal side of things, not the same with the other departments. School and county, you can find the school and county budgets on their respective web pages. If approved, the school budget is having their first vote tonight. They're looking at a 7.4% increase. So similar, but slightly more than what the town is facing this year. And the school accounts for 75% of our property taxes. What you pay, for every dollar you pay, 75 cents goes to the school. County, they're having some challenges, and they're looking at a 31% increase. And this is with a dramatically reduced budget as of a few weeks ago. And so they're usually about 5% of your dollar that you pay in taxes. This year, it'll be closer to 8%. So this is the graph that I wanted to show that kind of really, in my mind, summarizes where we are. The top line, the larger dash line, is the RSU budget, and they've been increasing at a more or less gradually incremental rate. They had the same COVID dip that the town did, but essentially if you took 2018, 2019, drew a straight line, you'd be pretty close to where they are now. So their trajectory has been fairly steady. The next line down, the smaller dash line, blue, is the town of Readfield. And you can see that we've had a fairly steady level of expenditure or net impact on taxes. And the 2019 is where we had peaked at our trajectory, and then we dropped for 3 years and again came back. So when I say that we're paying the same as we were in 2019, that's a true fact. Below that, we have the county, and they have had a fairly steady increase until recently, when this current year, again, 31% increase, that shows as a pretty big uptick at the end of that graph. And so this just shows the relative impacts over time. Municipal property taxes, again, the average home value was $200,000 in 2020. In 2025, it's going to be $330,000. So that's a 55% increase in that period. And it's a result of the real estate market in the state of Maine going absolutely haywire, and us having no control over that. So this table summarizes the graph that I showed previously. No need to go into detail on that anymore. Fund highlights. So funds are big reserves, are pockets of money. We have designated and undesignated funds. These are managed in order to contribute to the stability of tax impacts and offset some capital expenditures. So these are the things that would be similar to what you might have in a personal bank account or a savings account, and maybe even something in like something you've invested in, if you're talking about a homeowner or a resident. But our fund balances are conservative, and they are only estimated in 24 and 25. So we only know exactly what we have as of June 30th, 2023. Right now, we're in the middle of our fiscal year. We don't know where we're going to land. We've got a rough idea, but we don't really know exactly. And then FY25, the year that we're budgeting for, is pure speculation. And we're pretty good at that. We try to show things in a way that isn't going to leave us in the lurch. So that's why I say we're conservative with those counts. And use of these designated funds are up an estimated $100,000 due to capital project needs, and also the use of ARPA funds. And that's the money that we received from the federal government for COVID. So we're still in contact with that revenue. Use of undesignated funds. These are the funds that are not allocated to a specific purpose. Those are up by $50,000. So we are trying, again, to push as much of that money back as we can, while not overdoing it. We don't want to end up like the county and have a 31% increase in taxes because we gave too much money back and didn't have it available for the next year. We have a policy that states that we maintain a minimum of 2/12 of our total annual budget expenditures in our undesignated fund. And we expect that to be near the recommended 3/12 undesignated fund balance. So we have a minimum of 2/12. We are in no cases allowed to go below that. However, we can have more. And my recommendation is that we keep it at about 3/12. This is a graphic of what those fund balances look like. The red lines are the designated fund balances. Those are things that are specifically allocated for one project or another. And the blue lines are the undesignated fund, excuse me. And those are the general reserves for the town. We did see an increase, but we are trying to responsibly draw both of those balances down over the next couple of years. And really, I'd say by fiscal year 26, we should be very close to where we were in 2011, 2021. So we should expect growth in those reserves over time, especially as our expenses increase. We need to have that 2/12 minimum. So we do expect growth there. But again, we want to balance between spending the money and saving it. And that's what we've been spending a lot of time talking about and doing this past year. Current budgeted and long-term debt service. So this is things like bonds for fire trucks, bonds for municipal buildings. And these are, at this point, existing only. We are not taking out any bonds this year. And we honestly don't have any foreseeable bonds for the next, I'd say, 5 to 10 years. Things could always happen. We might change our policy. We might decide that it's better to borrow $1 million for roads than to save for 500,000 for 2 years. Those are all possibilities, but what this graph shows is a really positive direction. We see a modest decline every year in our debt service, which means we have capacity and that we have an even level of debt. If we didn't, we'd probably see spikes up and down in the mill rate. We don't want that. You don't want that. The star indicates the current budget year. The revenue highlights. We have a 1.5% tax base increase budgeted. That's from new construction and remodeling. We have seen a lot of that. It is starting to plateau. This may be the last year that we see that kind of growth, and we might not even reach it. We're working with the assessor to get all of that value that we can in order to minimize the impacts on folks that haven't done new construction or remodels, right? So when you build something onto your home, you should pay a little bit more in taxes. We want to make sure everybody's paying that if they've made improvements. Many revenue lines appear to be down due to changes in our accounting system, as Catherine mentioned. The big ones that are worth noting: capital reserves, solid waste, designated funds, and interlocal CEO, also unclassified, which is a small dollar amount, but also zeroed out. State revenue sharing estimates are down by 14%. That's where that $60,000 loss of funds comes from. We've been doing well for quite a while, but this last year we reached a population and valuation threshold. Those things combined with other factors pushed us off a fiscal cliff, basically, where we lost the second tranche, I guess is the word people might use, of funding for state revenue sharing. So that instead of being a small reduction, it was like, well, you get it or you don't. And so this year we don't. Investment income is up. We've had a really good year. We're seeing 5.25%, 5.5% on CDs and CDARS. So we've had very good yields, and that's helped out with our budget. Motor vehicles revenues are up by $25,000. We've tracked those carefully, and again, tried to be conservative because motor vehicles make up over $600,000 in our budget revenue every year, which is one of the largest categories outside of taxes. So we want to be utilizing that resource, but not overestimating. Department 96 transfers includes $22,650 in use of designated funds to offset tax impacts. So that's one of those new departments that we put together in order to address accounting that showed tax impacts and not just expenditures out of reserve accounts and things like that. We want to show what people are actually going to be paying for in any given fiscal year. And so this is part of that when it comes to the revenue side of things.
Eric, may I interrupt?
Sure.
You're about to move on to expenses, correct?
Yes.
So I think this would be a good time for the public to just have a break because that was a whole lot to take in.
Sure, yeah.
And if you have any questions or comments about revenues, we could take those now if you'd like. Anyone online or in the room. I think you must have done a good job, Eric. You either stunned them or you pleased them. And it gives you a moment to actually breathe, so.
Sure. Well, I hope folks can take a minute and look at this chart, and you'll see the differences. Anything that is showing at the very bottom line is showing a negative 7.2% for revenues, and that's only an accounting number. We're actually seeing about a 7.1% increase in revenues that actually offsets our 7.1% increase in expenses, and so you'll see those things, but. This chart essentially just summarizes all those slides I just went through. So, and again, if you have questions at the end of this or something you don't understand, let me know. I did go through that very quickly. I've done this about a dozen times now, and so I'm quick on it, but doesn't mean that you have to deal with me running too quickly.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. So expense highlights. We'll start with administration. And we'll go through these department by department, similar to revenues. Labor and insurance costs are up about $22,000. Again, we had negotiated increases, and insurance costs have just continued to go up. Assessing is up by $5,300 to cover map updates and software, which is important as we proceed with our revaluation. Excuse me, for the town. And just to be clear on the revaluation, even though we're capturing value for new for building improvements and things like that, we're not actually making changes to the structure of how we treat properties relative to one another until the end of the revaluation process, because it wouldn't be fair to just do one portion of the town and not the other. So we will be working on the next 4 years this revaluation, which will help equalize value, so that someone with a single-story ranch in one area of town is being built similar to the one-story ranch someplace else in town. If it happens to be on the waterfront, well, then we have to make adjustments for that. But that's the whole point of that revaluation process. And I did want to just make that note because I missed it last slide.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just one comment, because I know we've discussed this
Yeah.
quite a few times. In the revaluation process, if something is found to be amiss, so something was, say, being taxed that has been torn down and it's not there any longer, then that would be adjusted at that time. If something is found to be on the lot that was never said to be on the lot, but it exists, and that would require an increase in value, then that will be done at the time. So those things that are like mistakes will be fixed as they are discovered, but the total revaluation, just because time has gone by, is what we'll wait for the 4 years, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's a great explanation.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Added information. So code enforcement appears to be down, but that's due to accounting changes again. We had been showing the full cost of our CEO, but because we're not showing tax impacts that don't belong to the town of Readfield, we're no longer showing the expense that Wayne pays for their portion of our code officer. We're also not showing the revenue that would come in from them. So that's how that would work. And it really is the same type of thing for most departments that had changes. Heating assistance was zeroed out. Again, that was moved to a special revenue account. It still exists, and we're still putting money into that. And legal fees are down by $10,000 due to the diminished risk of litigation. We also have a fairly healthy reserve, and we're able to do that responsibly. Maintenance, the department is up a net of 8,900, and that's labor and maintenance, labor and materials. Community services, the library is up mostly due to labor. So you'll see these themes coming around again and again. Recreation, parks, and activities, we have beach expenses that are down by $6,000, but that is because we're doing some shuffling with our staffing. We are not going to be hiring a beach superintendent this year, if budget is approved as drafted. But we will be hiring a community programming coordinator, which will take on a number of the roles that beach superintendent had. And so we will have a partial reduction in wages in one area and then an add in another. And that community programming coordinator is a $27,000 cost for that position. So the net is about 21,000. But again, this is something that the select board has been talking about for years. And we've certainly felt the pressure here in the town office and among our volunteers of not having staff to really fully support the rec programming that we have for youth and adults in the town of Readfield. So this is something that I think will benefit the town pretty significantly. Protection fire department is up. It's a small amount again, but wages, we did carry on that same 5% for stipends and wages for the fire department volunteers. Ambulance is up. It's an estimated 10% increase. I'm not sure it's going to be quite that much this year, given the contract that I saw. But I expect in future years, we could be seeing 10 or 20% increases because those services are becoming much more costly statewide. And we're going to have to pay the piper on that eventually, even though we're partnered with the town of Winthrop, who has been a good friend of the town of Readfield by not charging us what would be considered market rates for ambulance services. Dispatch is up an estimated 5%. And I think that's going to hold. Cemetery budget is slated for a $2,000 decrease. We try to meet the needs of that department, and sometimes there are things are slower than other times. The last couple of years, we've turned some money back to the town as a result of not expending it all. And so this year, they've cut their budget just a little bit to try to more accurately reflect their actual expenditures. So again, another result of our changes in accounting, trying to tighten things up. Roads and drainage, we're up $50,000 for summer roads. That is because we have seen just unprecedented weather, rain. We found that a large portion of our culverts and drainage are undersized. We've had a lot of damage. We've had to spend a lot of money to replace that. We've had to put down more sand and more materials on the roadway. There's more freeze thaw. Things are just getting harder and more expensive with road maintenance, and we're trying to accommodate for that by adding a little bit to the budget. I guess it's a lot, but trust me, we need it. We have a small decrease in winter roads, and that's due to less than expected inflation, and that's a positive thing.
Eric, I think what we've talked about on the summer road maintenance is we're trying to do a little bit more on the preventive side. So we have less to do on the cleanup side after these large rain events that we have with excessive drainage. Is that pretty close? That
is absolutely. And one of the big things that we're needing to do more with is vegetation management, because trees beyond shading the road can cause a lot of damage with roots, and but the shade is a big factor, and also just the tightening, keeping moisture. All those things are bad. You need light and air to have a really good road bed. So we also don't want people driving into branches, which is happening all too commonly right now.
Thanks.
Eric, I'm sorry, the top line, the fire department stipends, was that an increase this year, or is that in this budget? Is that when it's taking place?
It is in this budget, yes. We would increase them along with other wages 2 or 3 years ago with COVID.
Right.
But what we've done is carried through, upon the recommendation of the budget committee and the select board, carried through that wage increase that was negotiated for the contract employees through to the volunteers, and anybody that had a stipend actually had that same increase.
So they got it when the town employees did, or they did not?
They did.
They did, and then now there's a 5% new increase?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
But that's to all stipends in town, not just the fire department.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually they had been the ones that we had left flat. And then someone had said, or a few people said, well, does that really seem right? I said, well, they don't want the increase. And then the discussion ensued, and we said, well, you know what, we really owe it to them because everybody else is going to getting it. And they're only making like $15 an hour, just above minimum wage, and they are an essential part of our town public safety. So we did, through a lengthy discussion, decide to increase that for the first time in a few years.
Well, and they were during COVID, our actual real first responders. So that
Absolutely.
makes complete sense.
Yep. Thanks for that. So capital improvements. So these were removed from the operating budget and moved to capital reserves. And what the capital reserves reflect isn't just money that's scrolled away for the sake of it. It's money that's being put away in line and as approved in our capital investment plan. So the capital investment plan funding items that are in this year's budget Department 96, it's one of those new accounts that we had to include the following areas: $13,000 for the transfer station, almost 14, and that's our town of Readfield share. The other towns are paying probably close to 55% of the total for that one. Municipal buildings is $40,000. That's to cover planned expenditures and also to fill some gaps that have appeared. This year, we just spent $15,000 on the septic system up behind the town office. We needed to replace that, and thankfully we had notice of that in time to be able to do that. We have roads, $275,000. That's for paving and reconstruction and large capital projects. Administrative technology, we have a low power FM emergency radio broadcasting license now. And so we have money put aside for technology for that. But fire department, $25,000. We had depleted the department's reserves pretty significantly over the past few years with building improvements and also them contributing sizably to the new fire truck that should be arriving this fall. We have maintenance, $34,177. That's lease payments for our equipment and also money being put aside for unplanned expenditures. If a piece of equipment breaks down, we do have a policy for all of these things that have minimum and maximum balances that we're trying to stay within. And $5,000 for the cemeteries.
Eric, again, I'm sorry. On the road, so we have a summer maintenance budget and a winter maintenance budget, and that's separate from those two?
Yes, so we have,
275?
the way to think about it is it's standard accounting. You have capital expenditures and then you have operating expenditures. So the operating expenditures were what we had discussed prior. And these are the capital expenditures, the things that if you put them in a budget like we used to do, would make it look wild. And that's one reason why we kind of separated these things out the way we have. Solid waste, we show a decrease, again, related to the accounting changes. We actually are seeing about a 7% increase. And now I'm going to talk about a couple of departments that are non-municipal tax. We include them in our discussion, again, because we have to bill, we send the bills out, we want people to be aware of what's going on. The education tax, which is the RSU budget, they're looking at a 7.4%, $300,000 increase. The county tax, which is Kennebec County and covers their services, 31%, $109,000 increase. So those two, we mentioned them, but again, they're not part of what we try to focus on. Debt service is us, that's in-house. This doesn't include overlapping debt like what we owe for the RSU, but that's a separate matter. But debt service covers things like our fire trucks, municipal buildings, all of that, $13,000 in decrease because we've been slowly paying down our obligations and we have no new on the horizon. Unclassified, most lines were zeroed out and moved to special revenue. And this includes things like the overlay, abatements, general assistance, stuff like that. And this table summarizes our expenditures. Again, you'll see a similar slew of red lines or lines in parentheses that indicate that departments have had significant drops, but that's just an accounting change. We actually are looking at a 7% increase overall. So I'll leave this up and ask for any questions about the expense side of our budget. Peter, to the microphone, please. Introduce yourself and yeah.
And general comments as well. You don't have to have a question, just state your opinion as well.
I don't have any, but just a question here. Peter Bickerman, Thunder Castle Road. Eric, I know we don't control the county budget, but 31% increase, what, other than the maintenance, the operation of the county jail, what are the, do you know, can you tell us more, but what's the components of that county budget? What would account for such an increase?
Yeah, so the law enforcement and the incarceration, so both sides of that equation. But the county budget, a lot of it is law enforcement and the jail. Part of the reason for the increase, there's a few things. One is the state has made some changes in what they require for mental health services and other services for inmates, and the county has to hire specialized personnel. They're also in the middle of contract negotiations, and I believe they were seeing 7, 10, plus% increases as a result of that. They've also, I think, added at least one position at the jail. But one of the biggest factors here is that they made the mistake, and I'll just say it flatly, they made the mistake of spending one-time federal dollars from the COVID relief funds on budget reductions to a large degree. So they have, a multi-million-dollar hole because of that. And that's one of the biggest things we're making up. The other things, the other increases, and the state mandates are, I think, secondary to that. But that's what happened.
Thank you, Eric.
They could have handled that differently, and this has been stated publicly. I mean, I've read about it in the paper. I've not spoken to the particular budget committee members, which are actually made up of different select board members from around the county. They tried to hold taxes level for the last 3 years, when they really should have been raising it maybe 0.5% to 1%, and using those one-time funds to fund one-time expenses. And instead of doing that, they used it to cover operating expenses. And so now that money's gone, they can't apply that, and we see this huge spike. They did cut about 2 weeks ago 20%. So we were at about 47%, and now we're at 33, I think you said, 31%. So they did bring it down somewhat. It may go up again next year, because one of the projects that they instituted was, I won't have the name right, but the new medical doctor on the EMT squad that they have now for the county. So that I think there's a physician and a physician assistant who can go out on calls. And they found money to fund that through this calendar year. They didn't want to cut it immediately, because they said it's been very successful over the few months it's been in operation. And there's probably a strong coalition of people who are going to ask for that to continue to be funded, but that's $1 million a year for that project, I believe. So they may be asking us for that next year. So we just kind of have to keep an eye on that. One of our county commissioners lives in Winthrop. Anyone remember his name?
Joe Petrosky.
Joe Petrosky. So if you're interested in the county budget, he's very welcoming to comments and questions. Mr. Durgan.
Peter.
Greg Durgan, Route 41 here in town. Just a comment first. Thank you to the Budget Committee and the Select Board for all the meetings and time and effort to put together a budget. Not easy. I appreciate your time, especially the Budget Committee, because they're not the volunteers. Thank you. I guess I'll ask Eric on Division 30, Rec Parks and Activities, the almost $23,000 increase. Is that for the community coordinator position?
That's correct. Yeah, so about 21 of that is for the community programming coordinator. So we had the 27 total for that position, netted out the 6,000 that we're taking out of the beach, and then the other small $2,000 increases for things like rec sports and whatever else.
Is that the excuse me, is that the total cost, including benefits and?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
One of the things we've talked about with that position is having that person who fills it try and increase the programs that are offered, and also increase membership in the ongoing programs that we already have. And by bringing in more revenue, that can be applied to their salary, the cost to the town for that. And also, as you develop more new programs, which we seem to get a lot of feedback from people that they'd like to see more things. I think one we talked about was yoga at the beach, and maybe having Eric be our instructor was at one of our meetings. That was a joke, but
Great position is my favorite. It's
so different programs like that you can offer through the year that our residents are interested in can be developed if you have someone who has the time to be able to do that. But our volunteers have reached a point where they're saying, we just can't handle anymore. We already have so many people in each of the sports, and they're all parents with young children who are participating, and these people are working, and they're doing all of this work and setting up for refs. And it seemed like this was the time to try and alleviate some of that. And the voters will decide if that's true or not. Anyone else? No? Do you have anyone online?
No.
Question? No questions online yet.
What's that?
I was just saying that we don't have any questions online yet, so go right ahead.
Oh, I just have a Bill Readfield. Comment on the roads and drainage expense. As we saw last winter, we had a lot of rain in December and January. And I foresee that this is a result of global warming. Mother Nature having vengeance on us, if you will. You see in Houston area where they have flooding from rain that's far worse than any they had from hurricanes. This is a way of life. It's not going to go away. And I think a little pre-planning might help the town in withstanding the damage, the effect, and what happened on my street was, and part of the reason this was bad too, was the ground was frozen. So all the moisture on the whole hillside flowed into the right of way. And it was more than the drainage system. And I say from the corner to the water district could handle it. And so the ditch backed up to the point it overflowed my driveway and then went on down the road, washed out the siding or the road curbing. And I couldn't pump my basement because it was flooded too. The water level in my basement was the same as the water level in the ditch. So, you know, this is going to be a big issue.
So you're supportive of us trying to increase the budget to pre-plan and.
I think, you know, you can, for instance, we brought this up at the February sidewalk planning meeting. And it was, we brought it up from the viewpoint that it looked like the drainage out of the ditch was not big enough to handle the volume of water that was in the ditch. So that the engineers made a commitment to going to do a design study to quantify the amount of water off the hillside and it won't soak in like it usually does. And then we'll be able to gauge the capacity of the drainage system to handle that. That's looking ahead to sort of like what I'm talking about. Look at the planning, what you're doing. If you're replacing culverts because they have to be done, is the replacement, maybe should it be bigger? I don't know. There's just a lot of things like that need to be taken into place. And speaking of the study, I haven't seen the results of that. Is that complete?
It's not. So we have about 75% design complete. What we've done is essentially the surface, right? Anything below grade, we're not going to be going that direction until we know whether or not the voters are going to approve the project. It would be, we've kind of made that break that we will do the plan, superficial plan, the impact plan for the right of way. If the voters.
You're not even going to do the study until then?
Well, it'd be a costly study, and so the idea is that if the voters don't want to approve the project, it would be foolish to do below grade work that doesn't really impact what people experience until after. But I can assure you again, and as the engineers did, that sizing will be engineered and will be appropriate for the water we have.
Okay. That's all I have on that.
Eric, addressing Bill's point, is that something the road committee has been looking at? I know you mentioned already tonight that you're going to increase sizes in culverts that we're replacing. Did we already do that on the Plains Road?
So we have design work for the Plains Road that needs to be put out to bid that does that. But I mean, Bill, honestly, we haven't replaced a culvert that we haven't looked at and said, is it the right size? And I'd say 75% of the cases, maybe more, we are saying it's too small and we need to upsize it. We've been upsizing regularly from 12-inch to 15, from 15 to 18 or 24. Whatever we have room for, we're trying to put in the ground because we know this is just going to continue.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Good enough which was good enough yesterday. Today, good enough is not good enough.
Absolutely right. I mean, we're experiencing washouts and damage from the Mount Vernon side of things on Church Road, on Sadie Dunn Road, where their infrastructure is actually even further behind than ours is, and it's causing some major problems. So we're having to look at this even as a regional issue to try to address this. But
We replaced a culvert in December, I believe, out off of Sturdivant Hill Road. What's the name of that road? The dirt road just before the town line.
Yeah, Huntoon, yeah.
And I think you said that went to a 2-foot?
18 to 36.
18 to 36, because it had washed away. And so the discussion at the time was, what makes sense? We're already digging this up. We've already got this huge washout. We're already going to be putting all this material back in. What's the added cost to increase the culvert size? And they made the right call and they put in, we're not rebuilding this road again. Let's put in the right size culvert for a small increase in cost now instead of a redo a year or two from now. And so I think if we keep that approach, that would be good. And maybe even to look forward to how many culverts do we need to replace? Do we need to make that a priority in next year's budget? Not this next year, but the 2026 fiscal year.
No, absolutely. And we need to look at all that. And the road committee has become more and more engaged in working, with me and with the deputy road commissioner and with our professionals, the engineers that we work with, to make sure that we are doing the right thing. Because it's, as Bill said, it's no longer enough to look at it, test the wind and say, well, that's about the right size. That just doesn't work anymore.
So next year, that'll probably become a pretty big goal because we'll be renegotiating or putting out to bid for a new winter road contract, right?
Yes,
one
we're
more year
talking
left.
about the sand application too, which has been a real challenge. Not to get too far off track, but we've been choking to death on sand in the last several years because we've had so many ice events and rain events that have frozen on the ground, and it's just been so much. It's no longer light fluffy snow that you can just push aside and then come back and hit it with a little bit of sand in the morning. We're having to change how we approach stuff, and everything has to change when we look at our roads.
Anybody else? Okay, we will move on to the fairgrounds project, followed by the sidewalk project, followed by concluding the meeting. And Jerry, are you the presenter?
I am the presenter. I'm Jerry Bly. I'm the co-process leader of the Fairgrounds Working Group. Steve DeAngelis is my fellow co-process leader, but as Eric mentioned, he's got important familial responsibilities tonight. Next slide, Eric. So let me just start with a very, very brief history of the Readfield Fairgrounds. The town acquired it in 1993. In 2005, a portion, about a little over 2 acres, was transferred to Readfield Corner Cemetery for expansion. In 2008, the Readfield Trails Committee was formed, and they took on the endeavor of improving and expanding the fairgrounds trail system. which is really the premier trail system in the town, used by many folks for many purposes. In 2014, the baseball field was constructed along with an expansion of the parking area. In 2022, an initial softball field and basketball court proposal came to town meeting seeking town dollars and was voted down at town meeting early last year, January 2023. The Fairgrounds Working Group was established to develop a consensus-based proposal for softball field and possibly additional amenities. Later on in 2023, the town meeting vote supported continuing that effort to develop a plan to be voted on at a future town meeting. And so here we are this year. In January of this year, the Fairgrounds Working Group presented a concept plan for the Fairgrounds Community Park to town residents at a January meeting, and by and large, there was strong support expressed at that meeting. Next slide. Won't spend much time here, but the Fairgrounds Working Group include representatives from, I believe, 5 town boards and committees, 3 outside government entities as well, a wide public members as well, wide diversity of people here, and it has been a great and committed group. We have kept with our commitment to operate by consensus, so all the work we've done and brought forward to the town has the full support of the working group. Next slide. So here's the proposal. This is a simplified sketch here, just because the details get confusing of the project. It's a little bit elongated, it looks like. But the key elements of the proposed Fairgrounds Community Park are: 1, an addition, a softball field. We have a baseball field. Softball field will allow the girls to play on a field that suits their requirements and need. That is going to be built on grade with the existing baseball field, and what that allows is a field, an area that can be used for other sports such as soccer, as well as an area that can be used for community events such as Heritage Days and other town events that may involve. It also includes a basketball sports court near the current baseball field. We heard loud and clear from a lot of folks in town last spring that softball field was not enough, that the town really needed a basketball sports court as well. When I say sports court, there's interest in having it utilized for pickleball and potentially other activities. We set about looking at a variety of locations in the village area, including the beach, including several spots at Maranico Community School that might be suitable, and a variety of locations at the fairgrounds. Ultimately, we came to a consensus that this spot here in the fairgrounds was the best and most cost-effective proposal. In terms of trails, the existing trail system will remain in place. In addition, I'm not going to point these things out, but I'm happy to if need be. There will be a new accessible, universally accessible trail suitable for wheelchairs and strollers and all that, leading from and back to the parking lot. That will also be integrated into a pollinator garden that is part of the plan. Accessibility is a big feature. What we've done in terms of everything from parking to porta potties. We'll have accessible porta potties there. In terms of the access to all the fields will be by accessible trails as well. So accessibility, and I mentioned the accessible trail that will allow really anyone who has mobility challenges to really enjoy the area. We've protected some of the key components, the meadow wildlife habitat there. Certainly, when you do development like this, you're going to have a major impact on the natural features of the area, and that is the case here. But we've done so in a thoughtful, strategic way, whereby we protected some of the most productive wildlife habitat areas of the meadow and sort of fitted into the surrounding plan. I mentioned the pollinator garden and then infrastructure. The plan is to bring both electricity and water into the property. That will not be for lighting, but it will be to power things for community events. It will be to have drinking water, drinking bottle fountain near the sports fields, and will also potentially assist the cemetery in having better access to water for their maintenance activities, watering plants and things like that. Next slide. So the cost, I mean, bottom line, it's about $1 million project. About 2/3 of that is really focused on the ball field, the softball field installation there. That part, you know, the fairground, it's not the perfect siting to, if you could go around town and pick a spot to build a ball field, that would be the least cost. It would not be at the fairgrounds. There's wetlands issues there. There's topography and grade issues there. So it's you know, we're going to be moving a lot of dirt around and putting in a fairly substantial drainage system to bring water underneath the fields and from one side to the other and all of that. And that's just a lot of money. So the basketball you can see here, I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but I think it would say just fair to say that it's really the softball field that is the driving cost component here, but it's also was the primary reason for wanting to do this. And I think we're adding value by doing it in a way that can serve other uses such as soccer, such as community events. Next slide. So project funding, as was mentioned previously, we started out from day one with the desire and expectation that this would not be built utilizing local property taxes. So that was our guiding light from the beginning, and it remains our guiding light to the state. So how might we do that? We have, I think, a pretty good plan in mind. It remains to be seen. We're already started the process of submitting an application for a federal Land and Water Conservation Fund grant that goes through the state, but it is federal dollars. It's designed exactly for these sort of projects, so we're not shoehorning something in. It is to fund municipal recreation projects. That will fund up to half the cost, up to $500,000. There's been a fairly large amount of money in that program, so we're reasonably confident that we will be successful in that. We've also begun to pursue enlisting the help of the National Guard to do a lot of the earthwork there. As indicated on the previous slide, big chunk of the budget is building the softball field. A big part of that is moving around a lot of material, and that's what the National Guard can do. They're also capable on installing drainage and other things. So we have an early inquiry into the Guard to try to do that. We hope to pursue some in-kind services from local contractors. We'll be writing some private foundation grants. Eric has already been looking into the Alphon Foundation that, as you know, has funded many, many recreational facilities around the state, including up at Kent's Hill. And then we'll also be seeking out local donations. So we have a meeting. It's the Fairgrounds Working Group's efforts are largely winding down, but a new group, including some of those members as well as others, is going to be taking the lead on the fundraising side of things. we have our initial organizing meeting later this month. The date escapes me, but, we welcome any and all involved in that. Next slide. Just briefly, the two articles that will be on the warrant. One basically authorizes the town to submit the grant to the Land Water Conservation Fund. That's required step in the process. So this basically authorizes the town to do that. And then the second article essentially authorizes the construction of the proposed Fairgrounds Community Park based on the concept plan that's been presented. It makes clearly that it will not be funded with tax dollars, but will utilize federal, state, and private grant sources and donations. That's it. Hopefully.
Excuse me, it's fine to have a question, but you need to go up to the mic because this is being recorded and also broadcast live, so you might have to share Jerry back and forth.
Does your parking plan recognize that we're putting parking on Church Road for the fairgrounds?
Yes, it does. So in terms of parking plan, a couple things that I should have mentioned actually. One is that we are slightly expanding the parking area that is there, fairly minimally in terms of square footage, but we are redesigning it so that in a way that will expand the number of spaces substantially. Now, about 20%, I believe, there. And then in addition, if the sidewalk project goes through, there's a fair bit, and somebody else will have to give you numbers of parking spaces between the fairgrounds and the village center incorporated into that, which will add some additional safe parking within a reasonable distance of the fairgrounds. On a busy ball game night, the existing parking area is pretty much full there. And we expanded it a fair bit just a couple of years ago. So the other thing we're going to do, is we're in the budget is paving the parking area, which allows for you to put down lines, which allows for efficient parking. And so right now you have people parking different angles, and you have lots of half spaces there and whatnot. So that is part of the plan as well. There was a real desire not to greatly expand the parking area there. We're already, as you can see from the plan here, really gobbling up a lot of the green space on that part of the fairgrounds and the habitat it provides. And we wanted to try to concentrate development as efficiently and effectively as we can. And we surprised ourselves with supporting paving the parking area. We did not go into it with that thinking, but we were convinced by the landscape park planner that we worked with that will greatly, increase your parking capacity, the real life parking capacity.
Without taking a lot more space
That's
out
right.
of the green space, so it actually made sense.
It was only 10 feet.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
10 feet that is being taken from green space for the parking lot, but the adjustment of the design, it's unbelievable how much more parking there is, in that quick shift. So
Yes.
Jerry, how many acres does this make up? Do you know?
Yeah,
about-
so basically the fairgrounds total right now, after we dropped out the acreage from the cemetery, is about 33 plus acres overall. Big chunk of that is wetland, big chunk of that is forest with the trails running through it. This part of the fairgrounds is about a third, so this entire area is somewhere around 10 acres. And I haven't run the math, but I would say probably the proposed development or the development portion of it is somewhere close to, it basically encompasses 2/3 of that. So we left about 1/3 as green space. Obviously, there's other patches of green space throughout. We tried to keep all the development up to the northern end of things and to protect the southern end of it. But basically, six plus acres dedicated to development and three plus acres of green space to the south.
So 6 acres really out of I think your number was 36 acres total for the
33,
fairgrounds.
but you know,
They
this is
gave
the
2 away
field area.
to the
This is,
cemetery.
yeah.
Okay,
This
okay, but
is-
it's still, I mean, you still got a lot of green space in the overall thing, and this is for, you know, a safe place just for families and children and all that stuff, so I think you've done a really good job of trying to keep a balance.
And a lot of
And the
that 6
impact.
acres is still green. It's not covered with pavement,
Right,
so it's still growing. So that's
exactly.
great. Anybody else? Questions for Jerry? Anyone online?
Mr. Sean, I just want to highlight that this year there is no field in town for any softball games played. So the girls softball team will be playing their home games in Manchester this season. So just to add that little nugget
Yeah,
into the
absolutely.
importance of this project.
We're here.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you to your whole committee.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Some of them are here. I won't ask them again.
Yep, no, that it's fantastic work that you've done. We've come a long way in the last several years and a really long way in the past year. And we're really very thankful for everyone who was involved. So with that, we will move on to the sidewalk project. I think that's the next slide. Yes, and is that you, Eric?
Yeah, so this proposed church road sidewalk improvements, something that has been in process for several years. I believe it was 5 or 6 years ago that we actually got the grant award. We had applied starting 7 or 8 years ago for federal funds. And so this has moved through several town meeting votes and including, you know, funding for ongoing planning project processes and all of those things that have to happen to get a federally funded project to the table. Here we are with a 75% complete plan. Again, as I noted, this is really only the surface. We have to, if we have approval from the voters to proceed with the project, then we will continue with the final design, looking at all of the three-dimensional planning that has to go into this, which is, you know, very important. But from the perspective of the aerial view and the design, what the residents see is important because it gives everybody an idea of where that sidewalk is going to be, what it's going to do. So we've had 3 separate public hearings for this. Which I think were fairly well attended. We had a diversity of opinions represented. We have worked very hard to make sure that we hear from a lot of people. We can't always accommodate all of the requests. It's public policy. We have to make pretty much everybody upset in some way in order to find a result that actually is workable. And I think that we're there with this final project. Not that I think everybody's upset, but we have tried to balance out the need for the project, which is safety. And I just want to point out really quickly that we have a few things in the budget this year that we didn't necessarily plan to come together the way they are. But when you talk about economic and community development potential, the 3 things that are coming together this year are the fairgrounds project, the community programming coordinator, which is a recreation and an activity-based position, and the sidewalk. And I think that if any one of those things happens in our town, we will be making a step forward and doing, you know, better for our residents and for our businesses. If all 3 of those things come together, they become mutually supportive. And we have a system that works really well together. We've got a great facility that's easy and safe to get to. And we have a person that can help manage activities there and townwide. So I know that there's a lot of discussion that has to happen around these things, and they're not connected. in any way in the warrant, but I think that when I look at it from a community development perspective, they really are. Anyway, back to the sidewalk. We've tried to balance things out, just like the Fairgrounds Committee has tried to do with their project, and conservation versus active use. We've had to look at things like maintaining the right of way, not going too far, starting off with a plan that looked at both sides of the road equally, so we could ultimately come to a decision that was that people understood wasn't just a one-off that wasn't thought about. We have done a lot of review on this, and we've had professional support with the design. The plan that we have currently calls for the sidewalk to be moving up the west side of the street, going past the Parker property, and then switching over and going up the right side, the east side. And that meets a number of criteria. We have a sidewalk, which is the real purpose of this: bicycle, pedestrian, safety, accessibility. And we are, in doing that, also trying to improve the drainage. We can't improve the drainage on the entire road. We are subject to just the impact areas of the sidewalk because this is federal funding for a specific purpose. But we're then able to go up and access the fairgrounds. Along the way, we had the opportunity to add on-street parking, which is a benefit to the fairgrounds, because no matter how many spots you put in that field, if we have the Heritage Days up there, or if we have 2 ball games going on at once, we're going to have overflow. And so that does help with that need. The idea of having the crosswalk transition right at that point, about 2/3 of the way up, really has more to do with sight lines than anything else. When you're cresting the hill, you have the ability to see the crosswalk, but you can see it from both directions. You have very good sight lines. And that location fit best with the drainage. So there are a few things that came together and dictated that. The sidewalk is raised. It is above the roadway. So we're going to have probably 6 or 8 inches minimum of elevation, so that if a vehicle strikes the curb, they have to go over the curb to get onto the sidewalk. That grade separation is really important for safety. And similarly, with the crosswalk itself, there's a speed table there. It's a raised crosswalk, so it's about 20 feet wide, and it raises up about 4 inches in the middle. So a fairly modest impact, but it does remind motorists that there's something there. And that reminder is really important in having them get in the habit of reducing their speed when they get in that area. Interestingly, the parking spaces actually do the same thing. Having parking spaces is a cue to residents and motorists to slow down in that area. So it serves multiple purposes. But that speed table, I wanted to get back to that. It will be signalized. So if a pedestrian pushes a signal button, it'll flash. But one of the things that's important to note is that not everybody's going to pay attention. Kids aren't always going to push the button. So that raised area really is a part of the safety feature. And when we originally looked at this plan, we had 3 speed tables proposed. But we heard some pretty strong feedback that wasn't necessarily what we wanted or needed in the town, because of the balance that has to happen between motorists and pedestrians. And that's really what that comes down to. And so we looked at the project with the engineers, with the road committee, and really tried to come to terms with what was the best approach. And we knew that having that raised speed table for the crosswalk was essential. That was an essential part of the project. But we also know we didn't want to see extra speed tables become something that people said, well, we don't want that project. It's going to really mess things up. It's going to screw up my car. We didn't want people to have that perception, because then the project might be at risk because of something in the roadway, when the focus really is on the sidewalk and maintaining that safe access. So we did opt to remove the 2 speed tables on either side of that raised crosswalk. And it's not going to work for everybody, but it is something that if we have issues with speeding, we can pursue a number of different options. If the select board wanted to, they could always add speed tables in. We could put them in even temporarily, like they do in other towns, to help just see if that's going to be a solution. And if it's not, or if it's too much of a problem, we can take them out. But the decision really came down to wanting to take the path of least resistance and the most ease when it came to making changes, because as we know, nothing ever stays the same. And we wanted to make sure that this project was built so that it would be acceptable, meet the safety parameters that we were looking at, but also be something that that would work for most people. So we've done that, I believe, in the design. Again, I don't think we're gonna make everybody happy, but there was a lot of thought into this and a lot of public feedback that we did listen to. We did pass along to the engineers. They, in most cases, responded to. And we're going to continue to work through the design process in that same fashion as we go from 75% design to 100% design, if this project is approved. If that's the case, we will have an 80-20 funding formula with 80% of the cost coming from the federal government, 20% being paid for locally. And it's roughly, I'd say, $1 to $1.2 million project. We really are being very conservative with that higher number, but we don't want to be caught with cost inflation, because we've seen in the last several years that you can have 10% in a year and then have 10% again. So we are being very conservative with that high end number. The use of reserves would cover a portion of that, so around $240,000 in reserves. 190 of that would be coming from the ARPA funds that will be basically fed into the roads reserve, and then the roads reserve will be applied towards the sidewalk project. The reason we have to do that is because federal funds are not allowed to be used to support other federally funded grants and projects. So in essence, we're shifting money from ARPA into this use. And then we have around $50,000 or $60,000 in our current sidewalk reserve that will be available at the end of this fiscal year. And we're suggesting we use 50,000 of that for this project. So we would have a little bit of money left over for any contingencies, but also longer term, perhaps for any maintenance needs. But that's how that's all going to be coming together. So we have a project that's being funded out of reserves and out of grant funds, and there won't be any current year tax impacts. That being said, just as with the fairgrounds projects, we are going to have ongoing maintenance costs that we do have to consider and have considered. But in my view, and I believe the view of the road committee and folks that are in support of the project, what we're doing is investing in our community. We're investing in the safety of the community. We're investing in economic development opportunities. So in my mind, it's worth the $5,000 or whatever, $10,000 a year we might end up spending incrementally over the life of this project to maintain it and to add additional work for things like snow removal and all of that. So there's a lot here. It's a very big project, but we do have excellent support in the Maine Department of Transportation. They provided oversight for this project on behalf of the federal government. We are being held to very, very high federal standards on this. It's part of the reason why this project costs what it does. And we do have the requirement that we have local project administration in myself and Matt Seams, who's involved with this as well. So we've tried to do everything we can to make sure that this does meet the needs of the community and meets the original intent of the application that was put together several years ago. So safety, traffic calming, on-street parking, lighting improvements, drainage, all of these things are going to be part of that project. And I have a picture here. You will not be able to see really anything other than that little gray line.
There is one there.
Because it is a very large, this thing is like 500 megabits. It's a half a gig of picture when you zoom in. But I'm happy to look. We do have the PDF if somebody wants to zoom in on anything. But really, that's the summary of the project, the cost, the process, and I'm happy to take any questions on that or comments. Yes.
What will the two related warrant articles say?
Yes. So, and I can actually.
Can you repeat the question, please, Eric?
So Alan had asked about the warrant articles, and I'm going to try to find those. Where did they go?
17.
Well, they must have
No,
gotten skipped
they're not
over.
in here.
Yeah,
Right.
no.
Do you want me to read it?
Are they in the packet? Not in my
I've
presentation?
got it on the.
It's in the newspaper.
Okay, yeah, all right.
It's in
well,
the
so-
packet that's listed.
Oh, it
in
is in the
web-
back?
Yeah, on, not this one, but on the website. Yeah.
Geez, okay, yeah, so when I prepared for this, I must have accidentally pulled that out, but we do have,
Accidentally.
so Ellen or Carol, could you please run through those?
I've got it right here. The Church Road, you're asking?
Yes, church road
Okay,
sidewalk.
so shall the town vote to construct a sidewalk on Church Road utilizing up to $960,000 in federal grant funds, $50,000 in sidewalk reserves, and $190,000 in road reserve balances, consistent with the Church Road sidewalk grant process and the draft plans attached to this warrant.
Okay, so that's the second one. The first one is before that, and that actually authorizes the transfer of those funds from.
Oh, sorry.
the,
Oh, so 16?
16,
Shall
yeah.
the town vote to appropriate the full remaining balance of approximately $190,169 in unexpended ARPA funds for the use in road paving projects?
Thanks.
So I'll go back to that picture. And yeah, no, so that we do have multiple articles, just like with the fairgrounds. It's a complicated issue, so we broke it up so that we had a few different things happening in a way that was digestible. And it is built so that if the project doesn't succeed, those ARPA funds still are available for an alternative purpose. I don't want people to think that that's the only outcome. It's certainly my preferred outcome and one I recommend, but that's not the only outcome. So that we did try to design that intelligently.
Bill.
As you may be aware, I've been involved in the sidewalk project for quite a while. I've provided some inputs. And it's based upon having lived on the street for almost 35 years and seeing just about anything that could possibly happen. I really like this project as it's gone forward, involving residents' input and review. And I think that process really does more than anything else to make the residents feel like they're part of the process and are more than willing to vote for its approval. They're a partner to it. And I can't emphasize how important that is. And your comment on the first page of this handout, where you say that comments and suggestions made by the public have been considered and a majority included in redesigns to bring us to where we are currently. That's very true to a point. And the point being the 50% design point. The 50% design included commitments made at the October as far as traffic mitigation. That was a really welcome to see. All the residents at the February meeting generally approved of the plan at that point. Some of the residents there had little individual concerns about how the impact on their property. For instance, Rosalie wanted to make sure that her basement drain was recognized because it goes under her neighbor's driveway. How they ever got there, I don't know. But anyway, those are the kind of minor details that were brought up at that meeting.
we've had the 75% design now, which took out the traffic mitigation. Contrary to the commitment that was made last October. Now that's a kick in the butt. That really is. That's being two-faced to be. It really is. And we didn't specify speed bumps. You put them in. We wanted traffic mitigation, speed mitigation. There's lots of ways to do that. You did it out on Wings Mills Road by putting in a four-way stop. That's traffic speed mitigation. Why? And people don't like speed bumps. I don't like speed bumps. Who's going to say, hey, I like speed bumps? You know, that's the same thing as I don't like to go to the dentist, or I don't like to pay taxes. You know, it's not a valid basis when the overriding consideration is safety. Taking the two speed bumps out leaves you with just the raised table, and that does nothing for speed mitigation. How do you go over a speed bump? You drive up to it, slam on the brakes, go over it at some speed less, and immediately floorboard. Nowhere where they have a speed bump for traffic speed mitigation is there only a single one. Nowhere. It's always two or three. And God, if you get stuck in Mexico on a back road in a town, you wonder if there's one for every person. But that's what it takes. More than one. And I gave Eric a couple of alternatives, and I don't think they were seriously considered. I think your road committee can come up with alternatives to speed bumps that mitigate traffic, that actually mitigate traffic. But they already did it in Wings Mill Road. If they can do it in one place, why can't they do it in another? So furthermore, you have the 75% plan out, which this is not the design plan, by the way, which I have not seen the design plan, but are we going to have a public meeting for the public to review it, the residents? That's the process.
So
Yes.
this is the review, this is the plan that we're voting on, Bill. It's 75% complete. And I hear what you're saying about the traffic calming, and I can understand.
I'm sorry,
I guess what I'll say, Bill, is that it was never a commitment, it's a process, right? Things evolve. And I think that there still is opportunity for a lot of the traffic calming that you're suggesting to be considered. We could put in central line ballers. We could do a lot of stuff like that.
Is that a commitment?
But that doesn't have to be part of this design.
Come on, Eric.
So Bill, what I can say is I can commit to you that if we have problems with speeding on this road after this is installed, if it's installed, that I and the road committee and the select board will take that seriously and work to mitigate it. That's what our job is.
You don't know when they're speeding. You haven't, or your road committee have not been out there to monitor it.
Well, we do know when they're speeding. We had a speed sign out there that actually tracked data for weeks.
When?
Last summer. I mean, I think most people in town have seen it driving on that road.
So I think
but-
what I could maybe add to this, because we don't want to get into a back and forth here. We want to keep it factual. The process is going to move along if this is voted in by the town, the process will move along in the same manner it has been moving along. So when we have the plans, we will hold public meetings to look at the plans and have people make comments. And you've made it loud and clear. Some other people have made it loud and clear that they want the opposite. They don't want, that's not right. They don't want more speed bumps or traffic calming
Tables,
devices,
speed
tables. And you're not saying that that has to be it, but you want something to control speed and that's the whole point of the project, really, is to make it a safer place. And so that will be considered in the next phase. And so you will have a chance to voice that, as will people who want to not have those features, just like we've done in the last two meetings.
so
Is that
you're
correct,
saying-
Eric?
Close. So basically, this design is the 75% design. We won't be adding speed tables back in if this is approved by town meeting vote, because the voters are approving what's here. What we could do, Bill, hold on. What we could do and what we will do and what I'm committing to do is that if we find there are issues with speeding, the select board has every authority to install speed tables, bollards, shoulder narrowing, anything that they think is appropriate to address that speeding issue. And I'll say that the purpose of this wasn't to necessarily slow vehicles down. The sidewalk gets people off the road and grade separated. That's the primary purpose of this. And the speed table has two things that help with that pedestrian safety while they're in the road. One is the raised table. The second is the flashing lights. So the project is respecting the focus of this. And I understand speed's a problem. I know it. I've heard from you. I've heard from many, many residents on that road. I've biked that road with my kids. I know it's a problem. What we have here is a solution that tries to balance those things out. And if we need to do more, I can say with confidence that we will try to do more.
I submit that you need to do more with respect to traffic calming. Speed bumps are not the only answer. There are multiple operations.
I agree, Bill. I agree.
And I heard Catherine say we're gonna have another residents meeting on this. Right? Is that what you said?
As the plans go forward, that's what we have talked about, yes, that we would have more public input.
I would invite the road committee to come too.
Well, and the road committee can discuss this in the meantime. In between when we get to that next phase of plans,
I
if the
think-
town votes it in. But I think the prudent thing to do would be whatever you have in mind for speed modifications, to submit those in writing so
The
that
road
everyone
committee
can consider them.
Doesn't live on Church Road. They need to be present and see firsthand the residents that do live on Church Road, how they perceive it. Get it firsthand. Otherwise,
That's what a public meeting is for.
that's it.
Right.
That-
And we had a great turnout, especially at the February meeting, where people spoke, as you mentioned, about their personal situations with the sidewalk, with their own property. And that's, the same way that we'll look at this. And if bollards in the middle become something that people decide is a good way to do that, they can be installed during the project. Or they can be installed later. I mean, that's something that has to be discussed and decided upon.
And that meeting and the 50% plan really represented listening and taking good action on the residents' concerns at the October meeting. And Carol has been deeply involved in this, and when we got in last fall, when we had two plans, which side, she refereed or posted or coordinated residents from both sides getting together, talking through it, and that's where the hybrid plan came from.
Actually, we walked Church Road
Yeah,
in the
well,
rain,
yeah.
up and down, and just talked and said, wow, it was Virginia Parker who said, how about this? It's like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It goes down Union, Union Meeting House and crosses to the fairground safely. So
And the only thing the design engineers did with that was change the location where we had specified the crosswalk. They had the sightlines information but
So I think we can trust that the process worked and that we're committing to the process continuing. And so I'm gonna cut us down now. You've been up for 17 minutes, so I think that's fair.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, but
I think I'm awful invested in this and I apologize for taking that much time.
No need to apologize.
no apologies needed. I just think that's good. I want to allow any other input, if there's
And
no one else.
absolutely want this to be safe. Safety is my primary consideration. And I've had that in everything I've done in my life. In the nuclear power program on submarines, safety was a consideration, both from the operation of the plant as well as the operation of the submarine. We wanted the number of surfaces to equal the number of dives, and we worked hard to maintain that.
We appreciate that.
And Maine Yankee, I worked in the safety analysis of the operating procedures for the plant. Everything had to be approved by the NRC. We had to be OSHA compliant. And I was in licensing and had to negotiate all that crap. But anyway, it wasn't crap, really. I shouldn't have said that.
No, but we hear you. We're good.
What I am saying is that I am safety conscious. And where I see things where there's a commitment to do something about that, and then that gets taken away, it affects the safety profile of what the project is.
Thank you. Yes.
I didn't know I was going to get up and talk tonight, but I did want to in response to Bill. I'm Henry Whittemore. I live on Giles Road. I've been in town for 34 years. I'm the newest member of the town road committee, and I'm delighted to be on it. And I am a little bashful about speaking up tonight because I am such a new member to the road committee. But in the meeting that I've attended and in the minutes that I've reviewed, I can tell you, Bill, that safety is paramount to the road committee. We hear what you're saying. We hear what other voices have said. We're really trying to do a balancing act here. And I think Eric is doing a wonderful job walking a fine line between those two. What I've taken away as a member of the road committee tonight, listening to Bill, is that we've got to revisit this, and we will have some very thoughtful discussion at the road committee about it. And I just want Bill to hear that one member of the road committee is taking this seriously and is listening to you and your concerns. And I think, I don't think this issue is done. I think it's in process, and I think Eric is doing a good job managing the process to try to thread the needle to make it work for all concerned.
That's good. And part of the thing is there are some very talented people on the road committee.
Right,
too.
right.
Civil engineers,
Oh, indeed.
engineer who's designed traffic circles.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, Pear is great. You know, I've been on a lot of town committees. It's the best discussion I've had on a town committee since I've been in town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, for your comments and for your participation on the road committee.
And Henry, your meetings are public, right?
All meetings
All
of
meetings.
committees are
So,
public.
Bill, if you wanna, the road committee meetings are public, so maybe you attend one of those, given what you got. The road committee meetings are public, so maybe they would benefit from hearing from you.
So I'd like to make a comment, and Darcy might get mad at me, but you worked for years on sidewalks and bicycle safety, am I correct? And was a spearheading person in town for our first sidewalk. And so thank you for doing that. And I think building this extension of the sidewalk system up Church Road is a testament to what you began, and I hope that we finish it. I think it's been very successful having the sidewalk on Main Street. It has helped to slow traffic on Main Street. People slow down when they see the sidewalk, they see the difference in some places there's a grass strip, other places there isn't. They see white painted lines, they see drains. It just naturally helps people to slow down. And so a piece of that will happen on Church Road. It will take a while for people to get used to any change, of course. But so thank you, Darcy, for being here and for starting us off on this sidewalk journey many years ago.
Right. Don Witherell was more pivotal in the first cycle.
Darcy's comment was that Don Witherell was more pivotal on the first sidewalk. But he's not here, so I can't really congratulate him in person, so. Are there any new comments on the sidewalk? No, okay, so we have some land use revisions to discuss about and oh my goodness, to talk about, and other ordinance revisions, but first I'm gonna put Sean on the spot. The note I was passing back to him a few minutes ago was, could he look up anything on the county budget? And Sean, your report is?
They met yesterday, and I can't make heads or tails of their information.
But.
How's that for honesty?
But we are having another meeting exactly like this in 3 weeks.
3 weeks time.
3 weeks time, exact same day, time and place. We held this meeting tonight so that we would have a meeting ahead of when absentee ballots come out, so that people would have had a chance to participate or to watch this after it's posted, which I know a lot of people do these days. Instead of attending, they view it later at their leisure. But we will be holding another one so that it's more timely for people who are like, oh, the school budget's coming up. Oh, the town budget's coming up. Oh, I want to hear about it. So we'll be doing this again. And hopefully we will have some county information to add into our presentation at that time. So Eric, are you presenting the land
Yeah,
use?
so
Okay.
it didn't seem necessary to bring the planning board in on this because basically what we're looking at, LUO changes, land use ordinance changes, are essentially required by state law. And they worked with professionals to help draft language that fits the need, as we've done with other projects in the past. And so we had professional consultants work with our planning board to make sure that we were meeting state law and also being respectful and meeting the expectations of our community and our land use ordinance as it stands, and our goals for how we want our town to develop, because we don't want our town to develop necessarily the same way the state does, and I'm actually fairly certain we don't. So we did, I think, a very good job of finding that balance and meeting their requirements, but respecting what Readfield is about when it comes to land use. So the state law made it a requirement. We met that requirement, and we had their hearings and their required steps to move that language forward. And now it is on the warrant as a series of ordinance revisions that change some definitions, change some tables, address some language. But really, the crux of it is around housing affordability, the location of buildings, density, things like that. A lot of it has to do with dwelling units and where and how they can be constructed. But Brandon's here. He was on the planning board. I want to thank him. I'm not sure if there's anybody else. Peter Bickerman, you were on. So we have 2 planning board members here in the audience. I want to thank them for their work because it was not an easy task. We had a short period of time to do it, but they did it well. And that's really my summary of those ordinance changes. Would either of the planning board members that are here like to say anything?
Only to say, to reemphasize that what we did in amending and proposing amendments to the land use ordinance was we only did what was required by the changes in state law. The state law created certain mandatory provisions applying to all municipalities. We hired a consultant, North Star, who helped with the drafting, though our chair, Paula Clark, did a major role of drafting in the end. We made a conscious decision not to go further. However people feel about the public policies of affordable housing, we did not intend here to go further than what the state law required us to do.
Thank you. And I believe we received grant funding from the state of $10,000.
We did, and we spent just a little over half of that, and we have some plans to do a little bit of more with some mapping and some build out analysis to help us understand a bit more. But yes, that was grant funding for that project.
So this is one of those, in my opinion, incredibly rare times where a mandate actually came with some funding to help implement something. And so we took advantage of that. So that
Yeah.
was, I think, very well spent money, because we could have the consultant that you ended up using was doing this in multiple towns. So they had a lot of knowledge and could cut through a lot of the issues that came up and just say, okay, this is what you have to do. This is what you might want to do. And they came to a great place where it was locally written primarily by the chair. So that's great.
And I'll just encourage folks to vote for it, because if you don't, we're gonna have to go back to the planning board and back to because it's state law. So we really need to have this stuff on the books. There's not much of a consequence if we don't, other than the state could start pulling funding or give us some penalties, ask for their money back, things like that. But it's important that this gets done. I think it was done well. So I hope people can support that, so we don't have to do rework.
Are there any online comments about any of this? No. Anyone else in the room have a comment on this part? Okay, Eric.
All right, so other proposed ordinance revisions. The select board had set a goal the last couple of years of trying to clean up our ordinances, take care of outstanding items, and move forward with some of the priorities in the comprehensive plan. The first of which was marijuana establishments. We have an ordinance. We voted to allow certain kinds of medical use and growing of cannabis. However, we've seen in towns around us an explosion of facilities, and we had 2 at one point in Readfield, and we're in process of considering a second one again. But one of the things that people have said many, many times is we don't want more than what we've got when it comes to these marijuana establishments. We don't want to be like the Green Mile in Manchester. So this ordinance change effectively says we don't want any more than 2 retail stores in Readfield for our 2,500 residents and maybe some visitors. And we want to establish a process to manage applications if there's a vacancy, if someone is, has their permit taken away because of violations, whatever it might be. We wanted to have a process to manage that, especially when we're limiting it. So that's what that ordinance change does. It limits to 2 the number of medical caregiver dispensaries that can be in the town of Readfield. Administrative ordinance, this addresses a few things. Some of it's changes in state law, some of it has to do with giving the select board clear authority in areas where they may have had ambiguous authority before, and some of it's just textual changes to make things more clear and concise. The waste disposal and recycling ordinance, that is what manages our transfer station. As you know, we've seen big changes in packaging, big changes in the types of waste materials that we're seeing. We have a lot of things that have batteries in them now that never used to. There's a lot more stuff coming in that is new to the market, new products. And so the ordinance changes help clarify the roles and responsibilities of the facility and the facility operators, primarily the transfer station manager, town manager, and select board, but also help clarify the definitions and then move those definitions out of the ordinance into an appendix, so that if we have to change a definition for what's an accepted waste and what's not an accepted waste, we can do that without having to go to a town meeting vote, because things are changing very quickly. And so that's the gist of that ordinance. The property tax assistance program, that's been in place for several years. It offers tax assistance to income eligible residents. So if you are eligible for the state property tax fairness credit, you are also eligible to apply for a local tax credit that actually piggybacks on that program and can give several $100s in relief, with a higher rate being paid to seniors. The reason we were able to do that is because state law gave us permission, and the select board wisely took advantage of that and put this in place. the biggest change here that I see, aside from streamlining the program, is increasing the amount of eligibility. So it was like a 200 or more dollar increase, I believe. I think it went from 300 to 500 or in that range for the maximum benefit. So that's an important consideration there. And then this disposition of tax acquired property ordinance, that's a new ordinance, again, related to changes in state law. The state has said that municipalities, if they acquire property, are required to then sell it and give the proceeds to the prior owner. That's also supported by case law from the US Supreme Court. Not tested too thoroughly, but the idea is pretty clear that those revenues from the sale of property should be going back to taxpayers. And there's a process for that. The town of Readfield has done something similar in the past and had a process. We had a policy that actually addressed this, but that wasn't enough, so we had to have an ordinance in place. So this ordinance meets that requirement of state law, and again, brings in our existing policy as much as possible to respect the process that we wanted to have and have worked under in the town of Readfield for several years. So all of these changes, all of these ordinances are available on the town website. The budget, the warrant, all of these things are available on the town website, either on the homepage under voting information, or if you go under the road commissioners page or the budget committee page for deeper dives into this information. But we also have the informational mailer that was sent out. But really, if you have any questions, reach out to a friend or neighbor who's on a board or committee. Reach out to me, reach out to the members of the select board, the budget committee. We're all happy to help answer questions. And we have information all over the place. I think it's almost to the point of being too much, but we've really worked hard to make sure that we have information available in different ways at different times for different audiences: print, media, electronic, email, all of those things. So I just want to summarize and say that we've worked hard on this budget and this warrant. I think we have some exciting opportunities for our community with these recreation and community development type projects. And I'll just stop there and say that's my piece. And I'll leave it to the rest of you folks to finish up the discussion.
Do we have any closing comments from the public? Are we all set at the table? Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and for tuning in, even if you're tuning in at a later date. We appreciate you paying attention and asking questions and being involved. And with that,
hit the dates.
The important dates,
Yes.
The 13th, which I believe is Monday, absentee ballots become available. The RSU ballots will also be available. They're actually meeting at the same time as us tonight, so we'll find out probably later tonight or tomorrow what they're going to put on for a number. May 29th, 3 weeks from now, is the final budget meeting. It will be identical to this meeting, so if you've been here, you don't really need to come to the next one because you're going to hear exactly the same thing, but you're welcome to attend. We like having people with us. June 11th is the secret, but the town meeting by secret ballot. There is one public vote that takes place at the beginning, which is to open the meeting. We only need one person there, and they are always there, and they open the meeting, and then we open the ballot boxes. So that is everything. Thank you very much for attending. I'll close the meeting at 8:26.
That was precise.
Well, we